The battle reflection that shone for an instant in the faces on the mad current made the youth feel that forceful hands from heaven would not have been able to have held him in place if he could have got into intelligent control of his legs. This quote foreshadows Henry fleeing from the firing line by using a metaphor to explain that Henry does not believe that forceful hands from heaven could give him enough strength and courage to stand his ground. If he had intelligent control of his legs, he most certainly would flee. At this point in the book, it explains how Henry is standing in the middle of a battle, watching many men fleeing and others staying to fight. This quote goes hand in hand with the next from the same page. The youth achieved one little thought in the midst of this chaos. The composite monster which had caused the other troops to flee had not then appeared. He resolved to get a view of it, and then, he thought, he might likely run better than the best of them. The second quote from page 33 depicts foreshadowing of Henry fleeing from the battle later on because it shows how he thought that if the monster, as in fear, were to show itself to him as it had shown itself to the others, he would most likely do the same thing and run far better and faster than they had because of the fear one feels when about to face a wall of smoke, screams, and fired shots of the enemy.
The men groaned, the luster faded from their eyes. Their smudged countenances now expressed a profound dejection. They moved their stiffened bodies slowly and watched in a sullen mood the frantic approach of the enemy. The slaves toiling in the temple of this god began to feel rebellion at his harsh tasks. To the youth it was an onslaught of redoubtable dragons. He became like a man who lost his legs at the approach of the red and green monster. He waited in sort of a horrified, listening attitude. He seemed to shut his eyes and wait to be gobbled. In the first quote, the soldiers are being compared to slaves in the temple of a harsh god. The soldiers are tired of having to continuously fight, just like the slaves are tired of dealing with the god's harsh tasks. In the second quote, the enemy soldiers are compared to dragons. The ferocity and prowess in battle makes this so. Henry doesn't think he can stand up against such a powerful and admirable foe, so he waits to be gobbled up and taken by the enemy's forces. In both quotes, each of the individual armies respectively is compared to something relating to Greek mythology. They're different in that one quote describes the Northern Army as a tired rabble, and the other describes the Southern Army as a formidable and dangerous foe.
A regiment was like a firework that once ignited precedes superior circumstances until its blazing vitality fades. This quote is a metaphor because it compares the regiment to an ignited firework. The regiment, once provoked, becomes superior to its opponent until its blazing vitality fades, most literally meaning until they run out of energy and motivation to succeed. The comparison to an ignited firework works brilliantly because once a firework is lit, it rises far up into the air, precedes superior circumstances, such as the ground, beneath it until eventually all its fuel is used up.
Another quote from the book which displays the use of metaphors would be, "Batteries were speaking with thunderous, voracious effort." While almost every other sentence in the book appears to be a simile, this one quote is a metaphor specifically. While lines of artillery don't actually speak, they do mimic the sounds of rolling thunder, especially in the background of an already chaotic battlefield. The metaphor may not be important to the overall meaning of the book or its plot, but it's a nice addition to the chapter, spicing things up from the regular system of using similes. One good example of imagery in the book is, underfoot there were a few ghastly forms, motionless. They lay twisted in fantastic contortions. Arms were bent, and heads were turned in incredible ways. It seemed that the dead men must have fallen from some great height to get into such positions. They looked to be dumped out upon the ground from the sky. Another would be, as he, leading, went across the little field, he found himself in a region of shells. They hurtled over his head with long, wild screams. As he listened, he imagined them to have rows of cruel teeth that grinned at him. Once, one lit before him, and the livid lightning of the explosion effectively barred the way in his chosen direction. He groveled on the ground, and then, springing up, went careering off through the bushes. The imagery in the book amplifies the severity of the battlefields and the actions taken during the battle. Most of the imagery in these chapters describes the look and layout of the battlefield according to Henry's perspective. The imagery in the quote from page 38 is so grotesque that it helps to paint a picture of a bloody battle and the overall chaos and destruction caused by it. The imagery used in the quote on page 43 is vivid enough in its description of Henry's thoughts and actions that one can visualize the chaos of the battle and one could actually picture being in a battle such as this right beside Henry.
So it's what it is.